"Looks like we have arrived just in time," a full-bearded Turk said, as he emerged silently from the thorny shrubs. "Ha! They even dare to start campfires to prepare their meals. They must think that they are on a picnic." Another highwayman with a sturdy figure appeared from the thorny shrubs as well. Despite his unusually squarish face, his other facial features indicated that he was a true blue Han. "Indeed, when have the plans of our military advisor gone awry before? It was indeed a wise decision to have us make a long detour around the mountain to block their escape path while the main force attacked them. This way, we can instill panic among their troops while ensuring that none of them get away at the same time. However, I have an even better idea in mind." A cruel smile crept onto the lips of the Turkman as he gazed at the billowing smoke beneath them. "Perhaps we can make use of their unwariness at this very instant to launch a sudden assault. No matter how formidable they might be, they can't have expected us to appear from nowhere. As long as we can kill half of the troops before they can reorganize their forces, those remaining won't pose a threat at all." "Hu Lang, are you insane?" Hearing those words, the Han highwayman widened his eyes in astonishment. "Are you trying to alter our military advisor's plans? Chong Dao, you have never been to the northern borders before, so you have never seen how vicious wolves hunt. After locating their prey, they would conceal themselves behind trees, boulders, and bushes before slowly creeping up on them. And just when the prey's guard is down, they will suddenly appear from behind and launch a sudden attack. With this hunting technique, rarely have any prey which those wolves set their eyes upon escaped from them. There are only 40 of them, and at least half of them aren't on their steeds and don't have their weapons with them at the moment. This is the ideal moment to strike. We won't get any better opportunity than this. If the Turkish army ever encountered such a situation on the plains, they would never let such a chance slip past their fingers. If the military advisor was here, he would surely agree with this decision as well." Hu Lang reasoned as he licked his lips savagely. Appallingly, his long scarlet tongue was able to reach up to the tip of his nose. The Han highwayman fell into deep contemplation. After a long internal struggle, the Han highwayman replied, "I still think that we should seek our military advisor's opinion on this matter before making any actions." He had a deep respect for the military advisor, and this led to an instinctive reluctance to alter the latter's plans. "I can understand why you wish to seek our military advisor's approval on this matter. He is indeed a very smart man, and I have a deep respect for him as well. But time is not in our favor. They won't be spending the entire night eating. By the time we receive a reply from him, the time would have already passed. Or do you intend to gallop down the shorter path to report this matter to our military advisor? But if you do so, there is a high chance that we might be noticed by the enemy. If so, all of our efforts will be wasted," Hu Lang said with narrowed eyes. The Turks who ruled the grasslands weren't as cultured as the Han, but they had sharp instincts for anything that had to do with warfare. And in truth, within the Iron Cloak highwaymen, Hu Lang was also one of the rare few who had a strong intuition regarding the tides of battle, and even Chief Iron Cloak Li was filled with praise for him. In fact, due to his ferocity, valor, and grasp of battle, he was highly respected amongst the brothers. In some sense, Hu Lang could also be considered as the third in command of the Iron Cloak highwaymen, ranking just beneath the Chief Iron Cloak Li and military advisor Zhouan. It was also due to Hu Lang's outstanding battle sense that he was chosen to be the leader of this operation to flank the Great Tang cavalrymen from behind. Chong Dao, there are only two options at the moment. The first, we circumvent to the enemy's flank and wait for the signal from our front lines to strike together. This plan is indeed less risky. It is almost certain that we will be able to destroy all of those cavalrymen. However, our opponents won't be as unprepared as they are now. Many of our brothers on the front lines will die in their charge. Consider why the military advisor went through the trouble of commanding us to take a huge detour just so that we could flank them from behind, wasting so much time and effort. It only goes to show that our opponents aren't easy targets. The second, we can launch the attack right now while they are unprepared and slaughter them clean. To prevent any of them from escaping, I will dispatch a 30-man platoon to block the path behind. At the same time, you can send the signal to our military advisor in the midst of our assault so that they can send reinforcements over immediately. This way, we will have cover even if our plan eventually fails. I think that this is the best option we have at hand. Through this option, we can minimize the bloodshed by our brothers. But of course, this will mean going against the military advisor's commands. There, I have already laid everything out clearly for you. Make your decision. Hu Lang turned to the Han highwayman beside him and gazed at him patiently. It was a standard practice in the Iron Cloak highwaymen to assign 2 men as the leaders of a platoon, and the rules dictated that the 2 men would have to come to a consensus before the platoon could take any actions. The Han highwayman contemplated for a long moment as the thoughts of obeying the military advisor's commands and grasping the ideal assault window clashed inside his head. Eventually, he gritted his teeth tightly together and gave his verdict. Let's do as you have suggested. Even though this would place him under suspicion of insubordination, there was one thing Hu Lang said that was true. The great Tang cavalrymen were indeed at their most vulnerable state at this moment. If they were to launch an attack right now, leveraging the benefits from a downward charge, they would indeed be able to minimize casualties. Chong Dao, you have made a wise decision. Hu Lang chuckled, seemingly having expected Chong Dao to make this choice. Pulling on the reins of his steed, he retreated back into the thorny shrubs. Brothers, prepare yourselves. Behind the thorny shrubs, many strapping highwaymen sat upon powerful steeds. Savagery painted their faces, and their auras revealed their incredible might. Beneath the hooves of their steeds were the circles of true martial halos. Kill them! The earth rumbled and the forests shook beneath the furious galloping of the steeds. 80 true martial realm Iron Cloak highwaymen had surged down from the top of the mountain to charge down upon their foes. The steep slope had allowed them to bring out the greatest potential speed of their steeds. In just 30 zhang, they had already achieved an incredible momentum in their charge. Hong long long. A huge cloud of dust rose into the air. 50 zhang. 70 zhang. In just a few moments, the highwaymen had already covered half of the distance to the great Tang cavalrymen's camp, and they were still building up speed. With the speed they were moving, it was likely that the cavalrymen wouldn't be able to react to the assault in time. Brothers, destroy them. The military advisor has told me that they have several million gold taels on them. Don't let any of them escape. Annihilate them. A huge gale blew beneath the charging highwaymen, sending fallen leaves and shredded grass up into the clouds. The highwaymen screamed their war cries excitedly as anticipation for the great battle they would have built up in their veins. Since Wang Chong was able to utilize the effectiveness of a downward charge to maximize the fighting prowess of the great Tang cavalrymen, the highwaymen could do the same as well. Eventually, as their speed reached the limit, they could easily kick away huge boulders that stood in their way. Needless to say, those bodies of flesh and blood at the bottom of the mountain. From the very start, the highwaymen were at a decisive advantage in this battle. Report! We have discovered the enemy is preparing their meal in the woods. At this moment, at a considerable distance away, a broad-shouldered highwayman scout cut through the crowd to report the intelligence he had gathered to military advisor Zhou and report. Lord Hu Lang and Lord Chong Dao have sent news that they intend to exploit the enemy's current vulnerability to destroy them, and they hope to gain the military advisor's cooperation. At this moment, another highwayman leaped down from his steed and swiftly rushed up to Iron Cloak Li and Zhouan. The 2 pieces of intelligence had arrived nearly at the same time. What? Hearing the news, Zhouan's face immediately warped in shock. That was not the command he had passed. But before he could even react, he suddenly heard deafening war cries and a stampede in the distance, and he froze. Too fast. Everything happened way too fast. Furthermore, the entire matter seemed to be spiraling out of his control. Zhouan, what now? Iron Cloak Li was also stunned. He was aware of Zhouan's plan, and the current event wasn't part of it. Hu Lang and Chong Dao were acting of their own accord. But nevertheless, Hu Lang and Chong Dao had been his subordinates for many years, so he believed that they must have their own reasons for doing so. At this moment, time seemed to stop as a tempest blew in Zhouan's mind. An aberration had appeared in his plans. The previous scout had reported that the great Tang cavalrymen were preparing food. Hu Lang and Chang Dao seemed to have chosen to act outside of the agreed plan due to that. If that was the case, it would indeed be an ideal window for Hu Lang and Chang Dao's platoon to strike. Even Zhou En would have nothing to say about that. Let me ask you, when you were scouting ahead, did you smell the scent of food? Zhou En suddenly asked. Ah! Not expecting the military advisor to ask such a bizarre question, the highwayman scout was stunned for an instant. I didn't dare to get too near, so that could be why I didn't smell anything at all. Damn it! That brat is too cunning. Hu Lang and Chang Dao have fallen for his ploy. Hearing those words, Zhou En's face turned livid with rage. Chief, we have to bring our brothers over right now, or else we might be too late to save Hu Lang and the others. As for the rest, attack those cavalrymen on the slope with your full might. Zhou En commanded authoritatively. A hint of panic had surfaced on his usually composed face. What? Hearing those words, the highwaymen gathered around the boulder were shocked. Even Iron Cloak Li was taken aback by Zhou En's sudden commands. Iron Cloak Li had never doubted Zhou En's judgment before. And more important than that, those men were the elites under his commands, most of them being at true martial realm. It wasn't easy for him to get these experts to join his wing. Jaya! Without any hesitation, Iron Cloak Li leaped from the boulder he was standing on and landed on the back of his crimson Fergana steed. Pulling the reins, he immediately galloped forward. Those from Deadly Serpent and Fiery Drudge will follow me. As for the others, crush the cavalrymen on the slope with all your might. A resounding voice reminiscent of thunder boomed across the forest, leaving Su Gan, Huang Yongtu, and the other great Tang cavalrymen on the slope dumbfounded. They weren't sure what had happened, but it did seem like a major problem had cropped up for the Iron Cloak highwaymen. What in the world happened? Huang Yongtu widened his eyes in shock. Shove that aside, the enemy is about to attack. Everyone, prepare yourselves. Zhang Lin bellowed in alarm. Being at a huge numerical disadvantage, there was very little they could do other than holding firmly onto their defense line. Wang! With the command from Iron Cloak Li, the bandits began to charge furiously toward the 26 great Tang cavalrymen once more. By this moment, the great Tang cavalrymen had already swiftly returned to their formation. Through the previous clashes, they had already learned several tactics that would allow them to effectively curb the bandits and the highwaymen. While the battle was still likely to ultimately end in their defeat, they were determined to inflict heavy losses upon their enemy as well. On the other hand, the elite's forces which Iron Cloak Li had named also swiftly organized their forces and galloped down the main road with him. Zhou En's instincts were rarely wrong, so Iron Cloak Li moved as fast as he could. It was a competition of wits between two camps just several hundred zhang away, but it seemed like they weren't going to be the final winner. Right after Iron Cloak Li turned around the bend in the main road, he suddenly heard deafening shouts in the distance. Kill them! A forceful voice bellowed from the right side of the forest. A powerful gale blew across the area, and tree branches and leaves bent in the face of its might. Hong long long. The ground shook, and countless birds darted out from the forest in shock. In that instant, the highwaymen felt as if a huge landslide was sweeping across the forest. Shit! Hearing the deafening roar, Iron Cloak Li's face darkened. He struck the bottom of his steed heavily to urge it to hasten its pace toward the center of where everything seemed to have started turning awry. Hu Lang, Chang Dao, and the others had already reached the bottom slope by now, so the ones who were charging at the moment couldn't possibly be them. And since it wasn't them, it had to be the troops of the great Tang cavalrymen. At this very instant, Iron Cloak Li felt flustered inside. Having witnessed the commanding capability of that young commander, Iron Cloak Li could only pray for Hu Lang and Chang Dao to hold on for a little longer, at least until his arrival. But Iron Cloak Li's prayer never came to be. Shit! We fell into their trap. As soon as Hu Lang charged through the thin layer of smoke and tore through the great Tang cavalrymen with his sabers, he immediately realized that he had fallen for the enemy's ploy. Those figures who were shrouded in a thin layer of smoke were no great Tang cavalrymen, but their brothers who had been killed previously. Long spears made of wood, each impaling through both the horse and the rider, had them erected upright along the area. The smoke drifting in the area was the byproduct of a few deserted campfires in the area, built for the sole purpose of luring them in. We have been fooled. Retreat! Retreat! At that instant, Hu Lang's heart turned cold. He had never expected the great Tang cavalryman to be so cunning. He thought that it was an ideal opportunity to destroy the great Tang cavalryman, but it turned out to be a detailed ploy prepared by the enemy. Hong Long Long. Kill the great Tang cavalryman. Despite Hu Lang's shouting, it was already too late. One after another, the highwaymen charged into the smoke and sliced the great Tang cavalryman into pieces. Too excited by the prospect of victory, none of them could hear Hu Lang's command anymore. And while they were excitedly slicing away at the corpses in the area, the incredible momentum that they had built up with great difficulty from the charge dissipated. With this, the critical advantage that they held was nullified. On top of that, in order to prevent the great Tang cavalrymen from escaping, Hu Lang even sent 30 men to the back of the camp, and this had made them even more vulnerable to an attack at this moment. Hong Long Long. Just as Hu Lang was panicking within, he suddenly heard a loud rumble. He immediately yelled for the other highwaymen to escape, when all of a sudden, a spear harnessing destructive force pierced through the smoke from the right. That spear was simply too fast. By the time Hu Lang caught sight of it, it was only inches away from him. Ha! In that critical moment, Hu Lang exerted his stellar energy, and the green halo of thorns within his body began spinning swiftly. Boom! For this short instant, Hu Lang gained incomparable strength. With his immense might, he jolted the great Tang cavalryman flying along with his steed. But nevertheless, Hu Lang also suffered internal injuries from the clash, and his wrists were numbed from the encounter. In a pure contest of strength, the great Tang cavalrymen were nowhere near his match. But with the momentum from the charge behind his attack, the other party's might could no longer be gauged by mere cultivation realm. Damn it! Despite having sent a great Tang cavalryman flying, Hu Lang didn't feel any joy at all. Instead, his heart further sank. That was because the second spear was already coming his way like a streak of lightning. The speed of this spear was so fast that it left a white afterimage in its wake. Accursed highwayman, die! Amidst the light smoke, the silhouette of a great Tang cavalryman came into view. The force behind his stab was so great that even Hu Lang's heart beat in fear. They were all mounted troops, but the horsemanship of great Tang cavalrymen was truly on an entirely different level from the highwaymen. Hong Long. Stellar energy gathered around Hu Lang's fist to form a green wolf's head at the tip of his knuckle, and he struck out furiously. By exerting his full strength, he barely managed to deflect the attack from the second great Tang cavalryman. But very soon, the third and fourth spear appeared nearly simultaneously, and this time Hu Lang failed to stand his ground. Pu Piu. 2 spears stabbed into his chest from the right and the left, and crimson blood spurted into the air as they were drawn out. The final sight that Hu Lang saw was the cold gleam of a sword descending from above. I'll be claiming this head. The cold voice of a lady sounded by his ear before the final sliver of consciousness escaped from him. Pong! The lopped head fell to the ground as Bai Siling's valiant figure appeared behind Hu Lang's corpse. Her sword was still outstretched in the position from her previous attack. Judging from how Hu Lang managed to knock a great Tang cavalryman flying, she had little doubt that Hu Lang must be a commander of this platoon. Her cultivation was significantly higher than the other cavalrymen, so she decided to deal with Hu Lang personally. For great Tang cavalrymen on a charge with Bai Siling, to have fallen to such a formation, Hu Lang could probably rest in peace. Siling, return to your horse. Don't fight with them on foot. A figure suddenly flashed by Siling, and Wang Chong's stern voice sounded. Unlike the other cavalrymen, he wasn't equipped with a spear. Instead, he was shooting out incredibly compact sword chi ceaselessly by flicking his 10 fingers one after another. Wang Chong hadn't reached true martial realm yet, but he wasn't dependent on his own cultivation to kill his enemies. What he relied on were technique and experience. For those 2 fields, there was not a single person here who could start to compare with him. For one, Wang Chong had made full use of the smoke in the area to conceal his sword chi of massacre. More often than not, the highwaymen whom he had targeted would be caught off guard by the sudden attack and sent flying from their steeds. And in a battle between mounted troops, falling from one steed spelled certain death. "I got it!" Bai Xiling stuck out her tongue. Even though she was old enough to be considered as Wang Chong's elder sister, she still found herself unconsciously revealing her coy side to him. Regarding this assault, Bai Xiling had nothing but awe for Wang Chong. To think that the Iron Cloak highwaymen, despite their decisive advantage in terms of numbers, would have actually prepared another hand. Had Wang Chong not astutely noticed it, they might have really just fallen to that. Through the effective use of a cloak of smoke, not only did Wang Chong draw out those highwaymen from their hiding spots, he even managed to place them at a critical disadvantage. Those who were intending to assault became the assaulted instead. The Iron Cloak highwaymen ended up suffering tragic losses in this assault. Nay! Bai Xiling grabbed onto the saddle and flipped herself onto the back of the saddle. This was a technique which she had learnt from the other cavalrymen over the days. Jaya! Pulling on the reins, Bai Xiling joined the fray with a sharp sword in her hand. Boom! 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 Halos shook as they collided heavily on one another, producing a reverberating metallic noise. Innumerable shockwaves rippled throughout the battlefield, creating ceaseless surges of heatwave that reached even 10 zhang away. Ferocious war cries and tragic death throes. These resonated heavily on the battlefield. The Iron Cloak highwaymen had numbers above Wang Chong's side, but from the moment that they halted on the main road, this battle was already over. Not a single one of the highwaymen was able to withstand the charge of the Great Tang cavalrymen. In just the first wave, through exploiting the advantage in their momentum, Wang Chong and the others managed to kill more than 30 true martial realm experts among the highwaymen while dispersing their formation at the same time. Once the highwaymen are unable to band together, they would be mere praise to the Great Tang cavalrymen, who specialized in battle formations. Hong Long Long. After a few charges from the 40 Great Tang cavalry, all that was left of the true martial realm highwaymen were heaps of corpses on the ground. The crux behind a charge wasn't the prowess of each individual, but the might of a collective group. To put it in other words, a highwayman standing in the face of a charge wouldn't be facing just a single cavalryman, but a ceaseless flow of them. More often than not, the strength of an individual was negligible in the face of a group. Retreat! Retreat! Chong Dao's despairing voice bellowed from the smoke. Slightly more fortunate than Hu Lang, he managed to survive the first charge of the cavalrymen. However, after witnessing the furious momentum the 40 cavalrymen harnessed, it suddenly dawned on Chong Dao that he had been underestimating his enemies right from the start. A huge gap did exist between mere highwaymen and trained military cavalrymen. Even his heart was leaping wildly in fear when he witnessed the astounding power of their charge, and thoughts of retaliating evaporated from his mind. Even he had little doubt that he wouldn't hold on for too long in the face of such might. "We have been overpowered. Don't bother standing your ground anymore. Brothers, hurry up and retreat." Chong Dao bellowed anxiously as drops of sweat trickled down his forehead. But in truth, his commands were completely unneeded. After failing several attempts to fight back against the 40 cavalrymen, the highwaymen had already realized the futility of their struggle and scattered like flustered animals. Some of them headed in the direction where their main force was stationed, some of them headed to the east side of the main road where the 30 men who Lang dispatched were stationed, and some of them even charged up the slope by the two sides. All in all, they were like aimless flies, darting anxiously in every direction in sight. This was how frightened they were of the cavalry's charge. There was no stalemate or intense battle at all. With 5 cavalrymen in each group, they swept through all of the highwaymen that stood in their path. In just a few moments, the 80 Iron Cloak highwaymen had collapsed entirely. "You bastard! I'll tear you apart." All of a sudden, a deafening roar sounded from the distance. The voice seemed to be imbued with such great power that the smoke and dust in the area were even blown away. In that instant, even the forest seemed to shake in fear before that enraged roar. Wang Chong turned around and saw an 8 chi tall man riding on a crimson Fergana steed 200 zhang away. That figure was racing here in a frenzy, a white trail of air dragging behind him. Beneath the hooves of the crimson Fergana steed, 5 similar-colored and similar-sized halos were shaking intensely, emanating a resounding metallic call. All that was trampled beneath its hooves was reduced to dust, be it grass or pebbles. It felt as if the figure on the steed would destroy everything that stood in his path. Even from several hundred zhang away, one could still sense the frightening disposition he exuded. Bai Siling immediately turned to Wang Chong and asked, "How did they arrive so quickly? What do we do now?" When they were planning this matter out, they had already anticipated the Iron Cloak highwaymen sending in reinforcements to back up the detour group. However, they didn't think the bandits would arrive so quickly, and especially didn't think Iron Cloak Li would lead the troops personally. Not only so, it seems like something is going on at the slope too. Su Gan and Huang Yongtu are under attack too. "Listen," Ma Song said with clenched fists. It was easy to overlook it back when they were in the midst of a battle, but focusing their attention, they could still hear some furious war cries and the clash of weapons in the direction of the slope. Clearly, the Iron Cloak highwaymen had decided to launch an attack on Su Gan and Huang Yongtu simultaneously as well. The enemy had reacted too quickly once the situation was slowly turning against them. With the clopping of war steeds, Iron Cloak Li's group was swiftly nearing them. At this moment, Wang Chong and his steed were standing in the middle of the main road as he swiftly analyzed the situation. Zhouan. He was the only man among the Iron Cloak highwaymen who could figure everything out so quickly and come up with swift countermeasures to his plan. "Carry out the second plan," Wang Chong instructed decisively. "But what about Su Gan, Huang Yongtu, and the others?" Ma Song asked anxiously. "We have no choice, they will have to rely on themselves." From the very start, this was an impossible situation. At the very least, we have drawn the main forces of the Iron Cloak highwaymen here. While there are still plenty of bandits and highwaymen left to attack the slope, they are considerably weaker, so the threat they face is already significantly lower than before. Given their strength, there is definitely a chance that they can escape the encirclement. Only those who seek to help themselves will be helped by the heavens. They can't possibly pin all of their hopes on us. Ma Song, release the arrow to signal Zhang Lin to break out of their encirclement, Wang Chong instructed. Wang Chong's primary plan wasn't like that at all. However, there was nothing that was unchanging on the battlefield. True generals don't stick to plans, but adapt to their situation and find the most effective way to curb their enemy. While there might be a little hiccup in their plans, Wang Chong still knew that he had room to maneuver around. In the next instant, a whistling arrow whizzed with a deafening, shrilling ruckus across the sky, headed for Su Gan and Huang Yongtu's direction. "That is the signal." At that instant, upon hearing the agreed signal, Zhang Lin immediately straightened his back and gathered his spirit. Wang Chong had instructed him to prepare to break out of the encirclement as soon as he heard the whistling arrow. In that period of time, Wang Chong would try to keep the main force of the Iron Cloak highwaymen in check. Even though he had no idea how Wang Chong would do it, or why Wang Chong was so confident that he could hinder the powerful highwaymen under Iron Cloak Li's command from returning in time, there was no doubt that this was the message he received from the note on Bai Siling's arrow. This was their only hope, so he had little choice but to trust whatever was written. "Brothers, abandon the defense line, reorganize yourselves and prepare to charge out of the encirclement," Zhang Lin bellowed. "Nay!" A few moments later, the long-awaited uproar from a charge finally sounded on the slope once more. "Everyone, listen to my commands. There are still another group of highwaymen stationed on the east side of the main road. It's already too late to save Su Gan and Huang Yongtu, so let's slaughter them clean to avenge them." Wang Chong raised his sword and pointed at the path ahead of him. "Yes." Hearing that Su Gan, Huang Yongtu, and the others were goners, the cavalrymen's eyes reddened in fury, and their killing intent seared the air. Hong Long Long. Under Wang Chong's lead, the 40 great Tang cavalrymen suddenly scattered before swiftly galloping to the east of the main road. But as scattered as they were, there was still order in their formation. "Bastard!" Hearing those words, Iron Cloak Li felt rage burning his mind. Given his understanding of Hu Lang, He knew that it was very likely that he would dispatch a group to the other end of the road to eliminate the escapees. Thus, there a good chance that there were still a group of his brothers at the other end of the road. The previous battle had already cost him 50 true martial realm elites, and even now, Iron Cloak Li's heart was still bleeding from the loss. If Wang Chong were to kill the elites at the end of the path as well, the Iron Cloak Highwayman might just never recover from this damage. Only Iron Cloak Li knew how much effort he had to put into gathering these true martial realm brothers by his side. It had taken him an entire 10 years to build the Iron Cloak Highwayman to its current glory. If Wang Chong were to succeed, the effort he had devoted previously would be rendered meaningless. At this moment, Iron Cloak Li was really starting to regret underestimating Wang Chong. He was so wary of allowing any of the cavalrymen to escape that he resorted to all of these ploys. Had he known that it would cost him such heavy losses instead, he would have charged forward personally to slaughter Wang Chong, even if it might mean the escape of some of the cavalrymen. For a mere 40 cavalrymen to have killed so many of his brothers, this was an unprecedented heavy blow to him. Everyone, listen to my orders and act with me. If anyone dares to escape, they will be beheaded on the spot. Iron Cloak Li barked wrathfully. His face was fearsomely livid, and his exploding rage was nearly palpable. Hong Long Long. The highwaymen who were still fleeing anxiously a moment ago suddenly felt their hearts freeze for an instant, and instinctively, they immediately turned around and converged back on Iron Cloak Li's group. With Iron Cloak Li's arrival, the hearts and morale of the highwaymen finally rallied once more. Within the Iron Cloak Highwaymen, their chief Iron Cloak Li represented an unsurpassable force that none could hope to challenge or stand against. Follow the chief and slaughter those soldiers. Avenge our brothers! The highwaymen screamed, and their courage was further inflated. For this operation, nearly the entire core group of the Iron Cloak Highwaymen had been mobilized. With the 30 highwaymen elites who were defeated previously, along with the 60 bandits and highwaymen whom Iron Cloak Li had brought along with him, the forces of the Iron Cloak Highwaymen were bolstered to 90 once more. But unlike before, the one who was leading the group this time was the mighty chief of the band, Iron Cloak Li. Hong Long Long. The bandits and highwaymen under Iron Cloak Li's command roared savagely, and their killing intent was so overwhelming that even space seemed to distort in the face of it. Chase them! Don't let them get away! This time, they were determined not to let the great Tang cavalrymen get away. Furthermore, even the heavens were on their side this time. After sprinting for a few hundred zhang, the highwaymen were already at their top speed. As compared to Wang Chong's group who had just begun to pick up speed, they were at an advantageous position. The distance slowly narrowed. 100 zhang, 80 zhang, 70 zhang. Boom! But just as they were 50 zhang away, an abrupt change occurred. Hong Long, Iron Cloak Li suddenly felt the lack of resistance beneath him. The ground his steed was stepping on had collapsed. Shit! Iron Cloak Li immediately realized that he had fallen into the other party's trap. He tried to pull on the reins of his steed to make it stop, but it was already too late. When the war steed's speed was at its limit, how could it possibly stop when and how it wanted to? Boom! With a resounding thud, Iron Cloak Li and his steed fell down with a cloud of dust. Beneath him was a huge pit filled with wooden stakes. Chief, there are traps ahead. Hurry up and stop. There were some who caught sight of what that was going on, and they immediately pulled on the reins of their hoses and yelled for the other highwaymen behind them to stop as well. However, since even Iron Cloak Li's prized Fergana steed was unable to come to a stop under such circumstances, how could ordinary breeds like their horses be capable of it? Nay! With sorrowful cries from both horses and men alike, many highwaymen found themselves falling into the massive pit, some even pushed by those behind them. Our time to attack has come. Hearing the commotion behind, Wang Chong knew that his trap had worked its wonders. Dual arrow formation. Charge! As soon as these words were shouted, the 40 cavalrymen came to a halt at the same moment, leaving behind a gap of silence in the air. To the highwaymen, this silence felt particularly unnerving, like the calm before the storm. Hong Long. The 42 cavalrymen suddenly turned around. Arranging themselves swiftly into the dual arrow formation before, they began charging toward the remaining highwaymen and bandits behind the pit. Hong long long. A deafening rumble trembled the ground as the 42 cavalrymen stormed ferociously into the chaotic formation of the Iron Cloak highwaymen. There were no words that could describe the astounding sight as many highwaymen were knocked flying into the air, and even towering steeds were shoved to the side. "Be careful! The cavalrymen are here! Block them!" Wretched screams that were intermixed with despair echoed down the main path. Looking at the young figure leading the charge from the front, fear and panic surfaced in the eyes of the highwaymen and bandits. It was that young man again. In the past few hours, over 200 of their brothers had already died at the hands of the great Tang cavalrymen under his command. Furthermore, the casualties included respected experts such as Hu Lang as well. On top of that, despite the multiple battles that they had been through, it seemed like the troops under the young man's command had only suffered minimal damage. In the face of such a seemingly infallible opponent, even the most brutal and fearless highwaymen felt deeply apprehensive. Hong long long. Men were knocked flying, horses were flipped over, and heads and severed limbs danced amidst splattered crimson blood in the air. Just like many times before, Wang Chong's troops pierced through the Iron Cloak highwaymen's forces easily once again. But unlike the many times before, there were two sharp edges piercing through the highwaymen's formation this time around. This formation had allowed Wang Chong to maximize the area of their charge and destroy even more enemies in their path. Once, twice, the great Tang cavalrymen swiftly reorganized their formation at the other end before launching another charge back at the highwaymen. The same tragic sight unfolded yet again, and the highwaymen's morale, which was at its peak just a moment ago, crumbled into nothing. Furthermore, it was at the hands of an enemy whom they outnumbered more than 2 to 1. From the start, cavalry was never required to equal their opponents in terms of strength. As long as they could tear through the latter's formation repeatedly and crush their morale, victory would be theirs to claim. Having spent half of his life as the great marshal on the battlefield, Wang Chong had commanded innumerable troops, so he couldn't be any clearer of the distinctive traits that cavalry possessed. If one could utilize their cavalry well on the battlefield, they could turn the tides of battle and lead an army to victory. Highwaymen who didn't even know the slightest thing about military tactics would never be able to understand this. We succeeded. Seeing the defeated highwaymen in the area, Bai Xiling was delighted. Had it been in the past, she would have never believed that she would be able to win such a disadvantageous battle, and without a single casualty at that. This was the first time Bai Xiling had witnessed the incredible potential that cavalrymen wielded, and this experience would surely influence her deeply in the future. "This is great. Gongzi, we managed to defeat them." Ma Song was excited beyond words. As a veteran who had served in the military for over a decade, Ma Song had followed many different commanders and participated in numerous wars. The fight on this battlefield could hardly count as the most intense and dangerous fight he had ever been in. On the treacherous battlefields, he could easily find countless battles which were even more dangerous than this. No matter how powerful the highwaymen were, they couldn't possibly compare to official armies. But nevertheless, there wasn't a single commander in the past who left a deeper impression on him than the young man before him. Despite fighting against an enemy that outnumbered them more than tenfold, the young commander was still able to lead them to victory while suffering minimal casualties. With his deep knowledge of cavalry warfare, he managed to draw out the full fighting potential in them. There were no commanders he knew of who could match this feat in the military. In fact, Ma Song even felt that there might not be a single commander in Great Tang who could rival Wang Chong in the field of cavalry warfare. Hong long long. One after another, the highwaymen fell swiftly. The cavalryman Wang Chong commanded never engaged in individual battles. Instead, they devoted their strength to complement one another as a single entity and bored their way through the enemy over and over again. More often than not, each highwayman would find himself facing not a single cavalryman, but a group of them. Such a strategy would allow the great Tang cavalrymen to mess up the enemy's formation, thus nerfing their strength and minimizing the damage dealt to them. Such an outcome might seem like an unbelievable miracle to others, but it was nothing exceptional for Wang Chong. Lad, do you think you have one? Just as everyone was in the midst of cheering in delight, a fearsome voice that seemed to have originated from the depths of hell suddenly echoed in everyone's ears. Those who heard the voice abruptly felt a bone-chilling intent, as well as a strong sense of danger and uneasiness. In that instant, it seemed as if even the air had frozen solid. Wang! Amid a cloud of billowing dust, a towering figure emerged from the deep pit. The dusty air seemed to distort around the figure. An irrepressible killing intent was fused with his presence, commanding fear from those around him. What was even more striking was that pair of frigid and malevolent eyes, belonging more to demons than men. This is bad. Wang Chong immediately realized that something was going to happen and shouted a warning. Everyone, be careful. But the demon was even faster than Wang Chong. Nay, no one saw how that man moved, but by the time anyone could register what had just happened, he was already standing right before one of the cavalrymen. His powerful shoulders crashed heavily into the powerfully built war steed of the cavalryman, and the horse's tendons and bones instantaneously snapped. Under the explosive impact of the crash, the rider and the steed were sent flying violently. Hong Long. Eventually, they fell headfirst into a tree, and blood spurted from them like a waterfall. Everyone, including Wang Chong, was startled by this sight. From the start of the battle until now, this was the first time a casualty had appeared in Wang Chong's group. Iron Cloak Li's blow was simply too strong. That kind of explosive power didn't seem to be one that a human should possess. Little Li, with a sorrowful cry, a cavalryman from the other arrow formation suddenly tore away from the formation and charged at Iron Cloak Li frenziedly. Humph! You're courting your own death. Hong Long. With another blow, the great Tang cavalryman who had torn away from the formation was knocked 10 zhang away into the air. That fearsomely immense strength was truly something to behold. Everyone was stunned. This was the first time throughout the battle that Iron Cloak Li had revealed his overwhelming strength. Don't leave the formation. Advance together with your team, Wang Chong bellowed anxiously. This was the first time he had witnessed Iron Cloak Li's strength personally, and it was greater than what Xianxia had told him. Da. Of the dual arrow formation, the first one who made a move was the formation Bai Siling and Ma Song were in. They were in the closest proximity to him, so they were the fastest to move as well. Kill him! The arrow formation formed by 21 great Tang cavalrymen charged forward like a gliding steel dragon. Raising a huge cloud of dust with its movement, they swiftly charged for Iron Cloak Li. Ha ha ha! Sneering coldly, Iron Cloak Li gazed at the huge crowd of soldiers before him without the slightest intention of dodging at all. At this moment, blazing rage had clouded his mind. If his killing intent could materialize, he would tear apart the heavens. His many years of effort were ruined at the hands of a small group of merely 40 soldiers. Even his beloved Crimson Fergana steed ended up being impaled by the stakes in the pit, losing its life. He had never suffered such humiliation since the establishment of the Iron Cloak Highwayman. That damned brat! Iron Cloak Li spat as a cracking sound echoed from his tightly clenched fists. Veins could be seen rising from his temples, and his devastating rage seemed to materialize as a crimson hue in his eyes. If looks could kill, Wang Chong and these great Tang cavalrymen would have died many times over. Since the start of the operation until this point, Iron Cloak Li had already lost more than 300 of his subordinates, and this was completely unacceptable to him. His anger and killing intent had already hit the roof. Today, regardless of the price he would have to pay, he would bury Wang Chong along with the 40 great Tang cavalrymen here. Nay! As the first group of charging great Tang cavalrymen swiftly closed in on Iron Cloak Li, his clothes began to flutter from the gale raised by the momentum of the charge. But he had no intentions of dodging at all. Standing right in the face of the charging great Tang cavalrymen, he slowly closed his hands instead. Hong Long Long. For that instant, time seemed to have slowed down innumerable times. Before countless gazes, a pair of sturdy and powerful hooves pierced through the cloud of dust and struck heavily on Iron Cloak Li's chest. But as the metallic hooves collided with the body of flesh and blood, a resounding metallic reverberation sounded instead. Iron Cloak Li stood firmly before the pit, not moving at all. On the other hand, it was the steed and the rider who was forced back instead. Wang. The sight left everyone flabbergasted. How is this possible? That was the only thought remaining in everyone's mind before a chill crept through their veins. To think that a body of flesh and blood would be able to withstand the full power attack of a heavy cavalryman, not budging in the least. He was like an unmoving mountain, knocking the charging cavalryman back instead. If they were not personally witnessing the situation, they would have never thought such a feat was possible. It should be my turn now. A chilling voice carrying irrepressible flames of rage echoed in the air. By this moment, Iron Cloak Li had already disappeared from view. Pong! The first cavalryman seemed to have been struck by an invisible, massive hand, and he was sent tumbling away with his steed. And soon after, the second, third, and fourth victim emerged. The tip of the arrow formation was where the power of the formation was concentrated at, but it was forcefully dissipated by a mortal body. Even those powerful war steeds who could tear down boulders in their path had their bones and internal organs crushed under his fearsome might. With every punch he made, a war steed would be sent flying and lose its life. Hong! After clearing away the 4 great Tang cavalrymen who made up the tip of the arrow formation, he flitted to the side of another great Tang cavalryman and knocked him down as well. Hua! With a slightly feminine shout, a white gleam of light flashed across the air, dragging a white trail behind it. A 3-chi sword was headed for Iron Cloak Li's head with astonishing speed. Boom! With an impassive expression, Iron Cloak Li allowed the sword to strike him without resisting at all. Clang! The incomparably sharp sword struck Iron Cloak Li's body, but it felt like it had collided with a steel plate instead, rendering the attack futile. Iron Cloak Li thrusted both his palms forward, and Hong! Air burst out of Bai Siling's mouth as she was knocked into the distance, crashing violently into a tree. Large mouthfuls of blood spilled from her mouth. Before the chief of the Iron Cloak Highwaymen, who dominated the grounds from Longxi to the capital, even a genius of Bai Siling's caliber was no match. Siling! Wang Chong exclaimed in alarm. Bai Siling possessed cultivation comparable with Marquis Yi and cousin Wang Zhiyan, but even so, she was severely injured by Iron Cloak Li in a momentary encounter. Junior, be careful. His iron cloak is resistant to swords and sabers. I was unable to breach his defense with my slash, Bai Siling uttered anxiously with a pale face. If not for her considerable cultivation which allowed her to use her stellar energy to protect her internal organs, she would have died from the impact of Iron Cloak Li's palm. Pooh! But right after saying those words, Bai Siling suddenly felt a sweet sensation on her tongue as a burning sensation rose in her throat. Yet another mouthful of fresh blood poured out of her mouth. It had only been moments since they had started the battle with Iron Cloak Li, but 5 cavalrymen had already been killed by him. Even Bai Siling had sustained grievous wounds. Iron Cloak Li was indeed a fearsome opponent. Lass, you seem to be quite worried about that lad. Don't worry, after I kill him, I'll make sure to send you off as well. None of you are getting away alive today. Iron Cloak Li raged angrily. With a swift maneuver, he immediately charged for the other arrow formation group where Wang Chong was in. Without bothering with any defensive maneuvers, he headed straight for the tip which harnessed the greatest fighting prowess. Hong Long. 5 spears carrying the might of mountains struck Iron Cloak Li's body from 5 different directions simultaneously. However, all of them were deflected by the black chainmail formed by Iron Cloak Li's stellar energy. An offense that was powerful enough to pierce through metal and flick up a man along with his mount seemed to be completely ineffective against Iron Cloak Li. Die! While Iron Cloak Li was stood perfectly rooted to the ground, the other 5 great Tang cavalrymen were thrown into the air along with their steeds. Pong pong pong! As the steeds crashed down to the ground, many of their necks were snapped. There were also a few which had their internal organs ruptured, and their sorrowful and pained cries were heart-wrenching. Brat, you're next. A cold gleam flashed across Iron Cloak Li's eyes as his eyes fell on Wang Chong. He was the cause of everything going downhill. If not for him, the cavalrymen couldn't possibly wield such fighting prowess. If not for him, Hu Lang wouldn't have died. His beloved steed would still be around, and he wouldn't have lost so many capable subordinates. having everything that he had built up painstakingly over the years destroyed in the course of a few hours. How could he tolerate that? The 40 cavalrymen could come later, but that young man from the training camp had to be killed at this very instant to quell his rage. So, Iron Cloakly raised his arm, and a black object reminiscent of a shadow shot forth from him. As if it had a life of its own, the black link of the stellar energy chainmail tore through space to strike Wang Chong. Hong Long. A deafening explosion sounded from where the black chainmail fell. A cloud of dust billowed, and the pebbles in the area were crushed to dust under the immense pressure. By a hair's breadth, Wang Chong had managed to dodge the attack. The sharp wariness for danger that the white-hoofed shadow possessed had saved Wang Chong's life at that crucial moment. Nay! The sudden cry of a horse caught Iron Cloak Li's attention. Turning his gaze over, he saw a great Tang cavalryman charging over through the cloud of dust, trying to exploit the possible opening he would have shown while attacking Wang Chong. Humph! Iron Cloak Li sneered coldly. Hong! With just a thought, the black stellar energy chainmail immediately rose up and expanded rapidly before abruptly falling from the sky, covering the great Tang cavalryman along with his steed. Ka-cha-cha! Crisp snapping sounds echoed as the black chainmail rapidly contracted around him, and crimson fluid trickled from the edges of the chainmail. The black chainmail trembled, and a sack of skin, meat, and shattered bones fell from it. Nay! Upon seeing this sight, the war steeds immediately backed away in fear. Even Wang Chong could feel a chill running down his back. Were it not for the timely reaction of Little Shadow, he might have been reduced to that clump as well. Brat, you shan't escape! Iron Cloak Li roared as eyes filled with callous killing intent fixed themselves on Wang Chong. Who? Iron Cloak Li retracted his palm, and that black stellar energy chainmail returned back to his body. That black chainmail remained completely unsoiled despite the great bloodshed it had just caused. Not a single hint of blood had stained it. Praise our mighty chief! Make good work out of them, chief! Chief! Upon seeing this sight, the Iron Cloak highwaymen who were still frantically escaping a moment ago suddenly began cheering loudly instead. Let's go and help Chief eradicate those damn soldiers. Brothers! This is our chance for revenge. Brothers, charge! As birds and beasts scattered in fear, the highwaymen stormed back in from all directions amid loud cheers. Suddenly, the situation became highly disadvantageous to Wang Chong and the others. With just his individual prowess, Iron Cloak Li had reversed the entire situation. Chief, we have come to help you. A cry filled with ferocity and bloodthirst sounded from the distance. From the eastern end of the main road, the galloping of horses sounded. 30 members of the Iron Cloak highwaymen were charging here furiously. Their arrival was truly timely. Wang! In that instant, even Wang Chong's complexion turned livid. One seemingly invulnerable Iron Cloak Li was already a troublesome opponent to deal with, but when coupled with those highwaymen who chose to return at this point, as well as the 30 elite highwaymen, the situation was extremely disadvantageous to them. What was even worse was that their escape routes seemed to have been blocked, and after Iron Cloak Li's attacks, they had lost their greatest strength, speed. Without speed, cavalry was no different from infantry, or perhaps even beneath them in terms of fighting prowess. At this very instant, nearly all of the great Tang cavalrymen could feel the stifling breath of death pressing down on them. That flurried clopping of hooves seemed like a harp pulling at their nerves. Unnerved, a 5-man squad leader turned to Wang Chong in nervous expectation. Lord, what do we do now? Even with minimal understanding of military tactics and warfare, it was as plain to see that they were at risk of a complete wipeout. Lord! Lord! Time seemed to have slowed to near stop for Wang Chong. This short instant felt as if it could be stretched for eternity. Wang Chong saw the crushed body of a cavalryman and his steed, as well as the deformed corpses and carcasses lying along the road. In the distance, Bai Siling was clutching her chest, and even remaining upright was difficult for her. The grievous internal injury she had suffered had caused her beautiful face to twist in pain. Ma Song was also severely injured. A dead steed was weighing down on his legs, and a pained frown stood on his forehead. A true martial realm expert possessed the strength to easily raise a horse, But Ma Song couldn't even gather the strength to free himself. Dust and sand filled the field, and crimson blood was slowly tainting the grass on both ends of the slope. Looking slightly further, many highwaymen were brandishing their sabers and swords ferociously as they made their way here. Even further ahead, a group of elite highwaymen was rushing over as well. And at the center of them all was Iron Cloakly, who was sending cavalryman after cavalryman flying with each fist. It was as if he was an unbreachable barrier that stood in the path of Wang Chong and the others. And throughout the entire period, his frigid eyes seemed to remain fixated on Wang Chong, as if casting a shadow of death on him. In the blink of an eye, they were suddenly surrounded by enemies, and they were at threat of annihilation. Retreat! Hong Long! Wang Chong suddenly rushed forward, and stretching his hand downward, he picked Bai Siling up and placed her on the back of his steed, while shouting a crucial command to his troops. Execute plan. 8 claws retrieving the moon. That voice echoed resoundingly, and the surviving Great Tang cavalrymen immediately began to move. Hong Long. In an instant, the Great Tang cavalrymen who were charging for Iron Cloakly abruptly scattered in all directions. Every single one of them chose a different direction, and even Wang Chong was fleeing frantically as well. This abrupt scene left everyone dumbfounded. They are escaping. Don't allow them to escape. Block their path of escape. Great job, Chief! The highwaymen shouted excitedly. Their chief was truly strong, as expected of him. Those cavalrymen had slaughtered many of their brothers, and even Hu Lang had fallen at their hands. Yet, the chief single-handedly destroyed them and sent them fleeing. He was indeed incredible. Brothers, we have to speed up. We have to help Chief clear them up. The highwaymen immediately felt their bloodthirst flaring. As highwaymen, they weren't as disciplined as military soldiers. Thus, in the face of trouble, they would find their morale plummeting easily, and they were more prone to giving up as well. But on the other hand, if they perceived themselves to be in the upper hand, their ferocity and fighting prowess would be amplified. Kill them! Deafening shouts shook the forest as the highwaymen picked up their pace. Humph! It seems like those fellows still have their uses. Iron Cloakly gazed at the highwaymen and bandits rushing in from all directions, and his tightly knitted brow finally soothed slightly. He turned his gaze to the fleeing cavalrymen and sneered coldly. To only think about escaping now, wasn't it too late for that? Hu Lang might have gauged the prowess of the enemy inaccurately, resulting in their tragic loss, but there was one thing he did right. He had sent 30 elites to block Wang Chong's escape road. Those cavalrymen had nowhere to escape to. Wang! Just as Iron Cloakly was about to join the pursuit himself, an abrupt change occurred. Before everyone's shocked gazes, the escaping cavalrymen suddenly turned around and charged at Iron Cloakly. Hong Long Long. In an instant, the 30 cavalrymen had reached the peak of their speed. Not only so, the formation of the 30 cavalrymen also swiftly changed in the midst of their charge. The seemingly chaotic positioning was gradually unfolding into a clear echelon formation. Taking a closer look, there were 8 rows, each with a slightly different number of people. Even Wang Chong himself had joined the formation so as to compensate for the loss of manpower. What is going on? What are they trying to do? The highwaymen were stunned. They thought that Wang Chong and the others were fleeing out of fear of their chief, so they had focused their efforts on tightening their encirclement and preventing them from escaping. But who could have thought that they would actually make a turnaround all of a sudden and charge back in? What are you waiting for? They are attempting to kill Chief. Hurry up and stop them. A loud bellow shattered the momentary silence. Chong Dao whipped his steed furiously as he sped forward furiously. Of all the people here, he was the only one who sensed that Iron Cloakly was in danger. Without a doubt, the Great Tang cavalrymen were intending to use their numerical advantage to deal with the chief with their charge. Even though Iron Cloakly was able to easily deal with 10 true martial realm experts back on the mountain, it was hard to say whether he could do the same for 30 well-coordinated cavalrymen. Hong Long Long. On the horseback, Wang Chong was glaring at Iron Cloakly with a slightly lowered posture. He knew that they were in an extremely dire situation at the moment. Whether it was Su Gan and Huang Yongtu or him and Bai Siling, they were tightly encircled and knee-deep in danger. Iron Cloak Li had single-handedly ruined the plans he had prepared with brute force and turned the tides of battle. If Wang Chong wanted to reverse the situation, there was only one solution. Kill Iron Cloak Li. He was the crux to everything. As long as he was dead, the morale of the highwaymen would immediately crumble, and those powers whom Iron Cloak Li had rallied together would fall apart as well. This was simply how highwaymen and bandits operated. They preyed on the weak and feared the strong. Should they feel that they were in a disadvantageous position, their natural instinct would be to flee as far as they could. The idea of upholding one's honor and fighting to the last man standing was something that could never happen among them. Xiling, are you prepared? Wang Chong asked with a hushed voice. I am. Sitting in front of Wang Chong, Xiling clenched her jaws tightly, and a sliver of determination flashed across her eyes. Even if Wang Chong hadn't said a single word, she knew that they didn't have much time. She would only have a single strike. This was the final opportunity they had to reverse the situation. If they couldn't kill Iron Cloak Li by the time the highwaymen converged on them, death would be what awaited them. Nay hi! With the disposition of warriors treading on a path of no return, the cavalrymen charged furiously at Iron Cloak Li. In that instant, the atmosphere was incomparably tense, and an air of death permeated the area. Humph! Allow me to quell that thought from your minds. Iron Cloak Li's cold voice wasn't too loud, but it sounded clearly in everyone's ears. He stood unwaveringly in the face of the huge wave of enemies he was about to face, and a powerful aura slowly rose from him. If his enemies thought that he could be killed by just numbers, then he could only say that they were too naive. Wang! A black stellar energy chainmail wrapped all around Iron Cloak Li, and the reverberating metallic sound from it seemed to grip one's heart. Come! A cold glint surfaced in his eyes. Before the cavalrymen could even reach them, Iron Cloak Li had already rushed forward to attack the first echelon. Boom, like a huge boulder being thrown in, Iron Cloak Li collided with the cavalrymen. Steel spears snapped in the face of the black stellar energy chainmail, and bodies were sent flying by that immense force of the crush. With just a single move, Iron Cloak Li had destroyed the 4 cavalrymen of the first echelon. Pained cries of the soldiers and sorrowful neighing of the steeds formed a loud cacophony, and the blood splattered lingered in the air in the form of a crimson mist. The steeds had some parts of their bodies caved in, such that even their bones were visible. It was truly a gruesome scene. But despite all of that, Wang Chong and the other cavalrymen continued charging forward without any hesitation. In the face of a living hell, their eyes didn't even blink in the slightest. They had no other choice at this moment. If they couldn't kill Iron Cloak Li now, the same fate would surely befall them eventually. Humph! Insects who don't know their place, you aren't a match for me. Iron Cloak Li sneered savagely. Boom! Before Wang Chong could rush in, Iron Cloak Li flashed and appeared at the east face of another echelon. Boom! His steel-like fist sent even the protective armor right into the body of the steed. His powerful stellar energy was struck into the side of the steed and escaped from the back of the rider. Oh! A dying scream echoed as blood spurted several zhang high from the hole on the rider's back, dyeing Iron Cloak Li's face red. However, this only seemed to further stimulate the savagery in his mind. This wasn't the first time he had killed a soldier, but the feeling of being in control of a situation and governing the life and death of another never failed to trigger his excitement. In fact, under his excitement, he could sense that his iron cloak was gradually approaching another breakthrough. With a voice brimming with cold savagery, Iron Cloak Li roared, "I will kill all of you!" Boom, 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 with 4 consecutive explosions. Iron Cloak Li struck yet another 4 cavalrymen with his shoulders, elbows, and fists, and sent them flying in a particularly gruesome manner. Ha 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 ha! Iron Cloak Li rushed for another steel echelon of cavalrymen. He had a nimble footwork which made it hard for Wang Chong to gather the full might of 30 people to attack him simultaneously. Iron Cloak Li might be confident, but he wasn't blinded by his own ego. Given the immense power of his iron cloak technique, as long as he could maneuver around the cavalrymen continuously, he would be able to strike at the openings in their formation and kill them all easily. Hong long long. But just as Iron Cloak Li was headed to the next echelon, something unexpected happened. Several zhang away from where Iron Cloak Li was, an echelon suddenly made a turn and charged toward another direction. This unexpected maneuver had caught even Iron Cloak Li by surprise. However, what was even more shocking had yet to come. Right when the echelon disappeared, unbeknownst to even Iron Cloak Li himself, another echelon suddenly appeared behind him, and in an instant, 5 spears containing the full might of 5 cavalrymen struck him forcefully. Pung 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 pung. And following very closely behind, another 5 spears struck Iron Cloak Li from another direction. Even though Iron Cloak Li had been making sure to remain on the move, 8 spears still struck him squarely. It was as if they had rehearsed it innumerable times beforehand, and 10 spears struck Iron Cloak Li squarely. Through his commanding ability, Wang Chong was able to move the cavalrymen flexibly enough to bring out their full might even against a lone and nimble target. Boom! A frenzied wind blew, and stellar energy spilled into the surroundings. With 10 spears striking Iron Cloak Li squarely in rapid succession, even with Iron Cloak Li's black stellar energy chainmail protecting him, he still felt his innards being shaken violently. His face swiftly flushed a bright shade of crimson, and it felt as if blood would ooze from its surface. This was the first time Iron Cloak Li had been put in a spot ever since the start of the battle. This is a good opportunity. Wang Chong's eyes lit up. Atop the white-hoofed shadow, Wang Chong immediately galloped furiously for Iron Cloak Li. Hua! With a ferocious cry, a true martial realm halo of thorns rippled around by Xiling as she brought her sword down on Iron Cloak Li. Hong hong hong. The intense collision seemed to have caused time to slow for this instant. Veins began popping up on Iron Cloak Li's 8-chi-tall body, and pain colored his face. But nevertheless, the 9-chi large black stellar energy chainmail protected his entire body from harm as firmly as a fortress. Be it the strike from the 10 cavalrymen or the slash harnessing by Xiling's full might, nothing seemed to be able to penetrate the black chainmail. It's no use. You won't be able to breach my Iron Cloak Te. Ah! Iron Cloak Li's hoarse voice swiftly turned into a pained cry as a 3-chi long sword with many exquisite flowing marks on it punched through Iron Cloak Li's black stellar energy chainmail and pierced his back. What sword is that? How could any sword pierce through my Iron Cloak technique? Iron Cloak Li's pained bellow shook even the air itself. The black chainmail swiftly gathered from his surroundings in an attempt to stop Wang Chong's sword from plunging any deeper. Hong Long. A violent and pitch-black deluge of stellar energy, accompanied with numerous steel-like martial halos, abruptly appeared around Iron Cloak Li. Boom boom boom. With numerous deafening explosions, Wang Chong, by Xiling, and the other 10 Great Tang cavalrymen were sent flying in all directions. Pong! Under the immense shock wave, Wang Chong ended up flipping in the air several times. Only after using several force-warding techniques and stabbing his sword into the ground did he manage to stabilize himself. But even so, he still felt a sweet sensation at the back of his throat, and the flow of energy in his body was in disarray. The first thing he did was to check on Little Shadow, and he heaved a sigh of relief after confirming that the latter was fine. This fellow is too strong, Wang Chong thought. An assault from 10 Great Tang cavalrymen charging at full speed, as well as by Xiling and him, and yet they were still unable to kill Iron Cloak Li. He did indeed possess a strength that could induce despair. Brat, what is that sword in your hand? A bone-chilling voice filled with killing intent and rage sounded. Raising his gaze, Wang Chong saw Iron Cloak Li standing upright in the distance, staring at him with eyes reminiscent of a venomous snake. The reason why Iron Cloak Li dared to challenge Wang Chong and 40 Great Tang cavalrymen was due to his powerful Iron Cloak technique. This technique allowed him to create an armor out of stellar energy that was impenetrable by sword or saber. No matter how skillful a technique was, if it didn't possess sufficient strength to overcome the stellar energy chainmail, it would be nothing more than an act. It went without saying that the defensive capability of the Iron Cloak technique was incredible, and most true martial realm experts wouldn't be able to overcome it. With this technique that provided both defensive and offensive capabilities, Iron Cloak Li was able to kill more than 10 Great Tang cavalrymen easily in exceptionally gruesome fashion. But just a moment ago, the Iron Cloak technique, which Iron Cloak Li viewed as his greatest trump card, had been breached by a sword, This was something that had never happened before. Most swords and sabers forged by the swordsmiths in the capital couldn't dream of overcoming his defense, and even the best of them could, at best, pierce through his stellar energy armor lightly. None of them were able to stab deep into his back after piercing through the stellar energy armor. Unlike Wang Chong's sword, for the first time, a slight hint of apprehension surfaced in Iron Cloak Li's eyes. At the same time, his determination to kill Wang Chong had also been rekindled. A weapon that could threaten him couldn't be allowed to exist. At the very least, it should never appear in the hands of his enemy. However, Wang Chong remained nonchalant about it, paying no heed to Iron Cloak Li. Everyone, we'll do battle off horseback. Use your steeds to block the highwaymen while we focus our efforts on slaying Iron Cloak Li, Wang Chong commanded grimly. A huge army of highwaymen was swiftly nearing them, and in just a few seconds they would be onto them. By that moment, defeat and death would be what that was awaiting them. But even at this crucial moment, Wang Chong had no intention of giving up. He was still calmly issuing orders to deal with the situation at hand. Jaya! The discipline of the great Tang cavalrymen shone through yet again. The surviving cavalrymen swiftly carried out his orders perfectly. The remaining 20 cavalrymen simultaneously leapt down from their steeds as they pushed them forward, urging them in all directions to block the ferociously charging highwaymen. Every single steed of Great Tang had been carefully selected and trained over a long period of time. To the cavalrymen, their steeds weren't just a mere mount. They were their companions, friends, and a part of themselves. Unless faced with death or complete defeat, they wouldn't be willing to give up on their steeds. After all, that would be equivalent to giving up on their pride. Without their steeds, they would only be foot soldiers on the battlefield. However, there was an even greater responsibility that a soldier shouldered, and that was to carry out the commands asked of them. For their goal, they must be willing to give up the lives of their steeds and themselves. This was the duty of a soldier, as well as their pride and honor. Every single soldier who had stepped onto the battlefield must have such realization. The current circumstances allowed them no room to turn around and make a second charge anymore. The only option left was for them to sacrifice their steeds to block the highwaymen. But even so, the time they could buy through that was severely limited as well. If they couldn't end this battle fast and kill Iron Cloak Li as soon as possible, everyone might die here. Wang Chong's command might seem to be a risky one, but it was the correct one under the current circumstances. Wang! As soon as the 20 or so cavalrymen landed on the ground, they immediately rushed for Iron Cloak Li. Seeing how Wang Chong was completely ignoring him, Iron Cloak Li couldn't help but fly into a rage. His face livid, Iron Cloak Li roared furiously. You wish to die? All right, I'll grant your wish then. Which of the highwaymen who made a living out of robbery didn't build a name for themselves out of slaughter? Wang! A brilliant halo emerged and expanded from Iron Cloak Li's feet, followed by the second one, the third, fourth, and eventually the fifth. 5 radiant halos beneath Iron Cloak Li illuminated the surroundings, granting Iron Cloak Li the image of a war god. True martial realm 5 Dan. 5 identical sturdy halos of thorns revealed Iron Cloak Li's true cultivation. Upon reaching true martial realm, one would be able to forge a unique halo that harnessed the power of law. And with each progression in one's cultivation realm, the halo would be divided to create another halo with identical properties. Thus, in the true martial realm, one could possess a maximum of 9 halos. The more halos one had, the greater one's strength and speed would be, and one's control over the power of law would be greater as well. Possessing 5 halos, Iron Cloak Li's fighting prowess was far above most of the great Tang cavalrymen, thus allowing him to sweep through them easily. Roar! With a ferocious war cry, the 20 cavalrymen charged right at Iron Cloak Li. However, the one to launch the attack first wasn't them. Hong! With a surge of shadow, the black stellar energy chainmail suddenly fell from the heavens to cover a great Tang cavalryman. Kachacha! With a fearsome cracking noise, blood exploded from within the chainmail, and the cavalryman was reduced to a pile of bloodied flesh. You. All of you, die! Savagery flashed across Iron Cloak Li's eyes as he retracted his right hand to don his stellar energy chainmail once more. With a swift leap, he charged for the group. Hong Long. 10 halo of thorns resonated with one another and pulsated as one as they collided heavily with Iron Cloak Li's 5 black halos. The differing halos crashed intensely with one another in midair, grinding and tugging at one another, and they vied for supremacy. A resounding metallic chime reverberated in the air. The shock wave resulting from the clash created a white gush of air that rose several dozen zhong into the air, overturning the top layer of dust and soil in the area. But eventually, the 10 halos of thorns were still no match for the 5 black halos. However, without their steeds, these cavalrymen were only foot soldiers. They were unable to capitalize on the immense strength granted to them by a charge on horseback. Single character consecutive slash. Just when everyone's true martial halos were completely suppressed by Iron Cloak Li, a cold gleam flashed, and Wang Chong abruptly leaped from the ground with unbelievable agility. While his cultivation realm was the lowest of those gathered here, his strength, battle technique, movement technique, flexibility, and speed were far beyond the others. Upon seeing Wang Chong swiftly approaching him, Iron Cloak Li narrowed his eyes nervously. Wang Chong's cultivation was nothing to fear, but the sword in his hands was a huge threat to him. Come! Iron Cloak Li also leapt from the ground, and clutching his fists tightly, he gathered his stellar energy onto his fist and struck at Wang Chong. As long as he could kill Wang Chong and steal his sword, the remaining soldiers would be no threat to him anymore. Boom! Iron Cloak Li's fist fell, but his powerful punch fell empty. The Wang Chong who was in midair dissipated into shadows, while the real Wang Chong suddenly appeared behind him. Pairing single-character consecutive slash with phantom steps, Wang Chong managed to fool even Iron Cloak Li. Iron Cloak Li's face tightened, and the black stellar energy chainmail wrapped around him swiftly moved to form multiple layers of barriers behind him. Clang! Under the multifold layer of defense, Wang Chong's decisive strike was forcefully deflected. Humph! Iron Cloak Li harumphed coldly. Without any hesitation, he turned around to send a punch at Wang Chong. Brat, you are too naive. Do you think that my Iron Cloak technique only has defensive capabilities? Even with a sword like yours, you won't be able to defeat me. Is that so? We can't really tell unless we give it a try. A young but frosty voice replied. This was the first time Wang Chong had responded to Iron Cloak Li's provocations. Everyone cooperate with me. Attack! At this moment, Wang Chong executed the strongest technique he had at hand. 8 steps of the furious flood dragon. The roars of innumerable dragons pervaded the surroundings, and one after another, the silhouette of flood dragons began appearing before everyone's eyes. At the same moment, numerous true martial halos began spinning with loud metallic calls as they sprang for Iron Cloak Li. At this instant, Iron Cloak Li finally felt deeply threatened. His Iron Cloak technique was extremely flexible in usage. He could layer it to strengthen his defense in specific regions, and it was this property that allowed him to deflect Wang Chong's with steel sword. However, strengthening a certain location would inevitably mean weakening the others. It wasn't a problem when he was facing Wang Chong alone, but if the Great Tang cavalrymen were to get involved as well, Iron Cloak Li's black stellar energy chainmail would become insufficient to cope with all of them. Nay, but at this crucial moment the highwayman had finally arrived. Chief, let me help you. With those words, a muscular Han wearing a sleeveless shirt leapt over with his steed. One of the strongest aides of Iron Cloak Li had arrived, Chong Dao. Chief, I am here as well. Chief will help you. Brothers, kill these soldiers and exact vengeance for our dead brothers. Wave after wave of highwaymen arrived in the area after slaying the war steeds at the perimeter. Ha ha ha. Good, good. You all did well. Hearing those voices, Iron Cloak Li laughed heartily. He felt deeply threatened by Wang Chong's with steel sword, and it was like rain in the middle of a drought for reinforcements to arrive at this moment. Brat, looks like even the heavens are on my side. Why don't you just obediently give in, and I might give you a painless death. A powerful surge of stellar energy burst from Iron Cloak Li, and with just the shockwave of the explosion, he was actually able to forcefully stop Wang Chong's 8 steps of the furious flood dragon. Nay, the highwaymen were swiftly converging on the area. Hearing the war cries of the highwaymen swiftly cresting, the great Tang cavalrymen's faces warped in despair. Wang Chong and Bai Siling's hearts sunk as well. It was too late. Even with the Wu's steel sword in hand, there was nothing they could do. Their final attempt had failed, and the ultimate fate that awaited them was being cut to their deaths. Listen to my command. Ignore the other highwaymen and focus our attacks on Iron Cloak Li. Even if we have to die, we must bring him down with us. Determination flashed across Wang Chong's mind as he bellowed furiously. After spouting those words, Wang Chong immediately executed the single-character consecutive slash and rushed at Iron Cloak Li. You brat! No matter what, I'll surely kill you today. Iron Cloak Li flew into a rage. Driven up a corner, Wang Chong actually wanted to pull him down with him. This left Iron Cloak Li incensed. Ultimately, the reason why everything went wrong, and how so many of their men ended up being killed by a mere 40 soldiers was the fault of this brat. It wouldn't matter to Iron Cloak Li if anyone else were to escape today, but he was determined to kill this brat at any cost. I would like to see how an ant like you who hasn't even reached true martial realm is going to kill me. Iron Cloak Li bellowed, as killing intent suffused his eyes. Wang! With a flash of shadow, a black offshoot shot from his body toward Wang Chong. It was the stellar energy chainmail. At this crucial moment, Iron Cloak Li decided to use his stellar energy chainmail to crush Wang Chong's body and bones together, just like what he did to the other cavalrymen. Only through this could he vent the rage of having lost so many of the elites under him. To quell his rage, he would have to slay this brat himself. Wang! Without the help of the white-hoofed shadow this time around, Wang Chong was unable to move swiftly enough to dodge the stellar energy chainmail this time. With a huge shadow, it fell from the sky and covered Wang Chong along with his sword. With his body tightly constricted by the stellar energy chainmail, Wang Chong's movement was severely limited. His sword might be able to pierce through the stellar energy chainmail, but unable to move his body, there was nothing he could do anymore. With Wang Chong's death, no one else would be able to threaten Iron Cloak Li anymore. Xiling now. Move. Everything happened in the course of a split second. Just as Iron Cloak Li was about to tighten the stellar energy chainmail to crush Wang Chong into pieces, Wang Chong's sharp cry suddenly echoed from the chainmail. What the heck? Iron Cloak Li was alarmed by Wang Chong's sudden shout. No matter how slow he was, it was apparent that there was something wrong with the situation. An arrangement that young commander put his life on the line for couldn't possibly spell anything good for him. Everything seemed to reek deeply of a scheme. Hua! But before he could even do anything, he suddenly heard a cry behind him along with the shrill sound of a sharp object traversing through the air. Everything happened quickly. By the time Iron Cloak Li heard those sounds, the other party's sword was already nearing his neck. Under normal circumstances, Iron Cloak Li might have been able to dodge. But to deal with Wang Chong, he had devoted most of his attention to manipulating his stellar energy chainmail, which resulted in a slight impairment in his movements, preventing him from dodging this sudden attack. Hong Long. All Iron Cloak Li managed to do in that fraction of a second was to gather his stellar energy to protect his neck and send out a palm before that sword slid through his neck. To his horror, his dense deluge of stellar energy actually failed to stop the sword even by the slightest instant. That sword! Seeing that familiar blade beneath his neck, realization flashed across Iron Cloak Li's mind before everything blacked out. Chief! A desolate scream echoed in the air. The highwaymen who had rushed over here furiously ended up witnessing a sight that they would never forget, one that would shatter their guts and induce utter despair in them. A young lady in white beheading their chief. From the moment they saw their chief getting killed, their initial delight and excitement vanished along with the wind. Their blood ran cold, and their hearts sank. Killed. Their chief was killed. Their chief was actually killed. At this moment, time seemed to have come to a halt. Even the horses had fallen silent. To the highwaymen who had just arrived, there was no confusion or doubts about the matter. They had seen everything as clear as day. At the moment when victory was just in their grasp, that young commander stepped forward and served as a bait to draw away the chief's stellar energy chainmail. But in that instant, making use of Iron Cloak Li's blind spot, That sharp sword was thrown in an arc to the white-clothed young lady. Making use of the sharp sword, the young lady sliced through the chief's neck, thus rewriting the conclusion of the battle. Just like that, a sure-win battle had been turned around. So, with Iron Cloak Li's death, the stellar energy chainmail was undone, and Wang Chong was released from its tight grip. Pong! As soon as Wang Chong was freed, he immediately rushed forward to pick up Iron Cloak Li's head. Iron Cloak Li is dead. Anyone who dares to continue standing against us will only be killed. Let it be known that should the Bureau of Punishments issue an arrest warrant, you will be caught and dealt with even if you were to flee to the western regions. Raising Iron Cloak Li's head with his right hand, Wang Chong's sharp and cold gaze swept across the bandits, leaving their hearts on the edge. Too many of their brothers had died. Hu Lang's death was a huge blow, and now, even their chief who possessed unparalleled strength had fallen in the face of the schemes of this young man. At this moment, even someone as vicious as Chang Dao was feeling frightened and apprehensive. No one could tell what other ploys the young man had up his sleeves, or what other means he possessed. With a force of 40, they had killed more than 300 of their brothers, along with their chief. How many more of them would die facing the remaining 20? At this instant, even the bravest of the highwaymen couldn't help but feel daunted. With the death of their chief, their morale had been utterly shattered. They might still have a reason to fight when their chief was around, but it had vanished along with his parting. At this moment, even if they were to, by some stroke of luck, kill these cavalrymen, it would be meaningless to them. Not only would they not gain anything from it, they might even lose their lives instead. What are you waiting for? Disappear from my sight. Carrying the head up high, Wang Chong bellowed deafeningly. In that instant, as if awakening from a dream, the highwaymen and bandits immediately scattered in all directions, fleeing frantically for their lives. In just a short instant, the 80 highwaymen and bandits had vanished entirely. Lord, we have won! One of the surviving Great Tang cavalrymen heaved a long sigh of relief. We did overcome the crisis, but we haven't won yet. Let's go. There is still one last thing for us to do. Shaking his head, Wang Chong turned his gaze to the distance. There, the commotion seemed to be growing louder and louder. The battle by the slope was extremely intense. The bandits and highwaymen in the area rushed right up to Su Gan and Huang Yongtu ceaselessly, as if the endless waves of the ocean. Bad news, military advisor. Bad news. At the end of the bend by the main road, a highwayman rushed over to Zhou En and reported, Military advisor? Bad news. The chief has. Kneeling on the floor, the highwayman's face was thick with fear. Panicked, he stuttered nervously as he pointed in the distance, and for a long moment, he was unable to voice his words out. Pa! A palm suddenly slapped the face of the highwayman harshly. You cretin, speak clearly. What happened to the chief? Zhou En roared furiously. That bastard kept saying that something bad had happened, but he simply couldn't say what was going on. That had almost made him faint of anxiety. Military advisor. Chief has been killed. The highwayman froze for a moment before he regained his speech and finished his words. Hong Long. That seemingly ordinary words of the highwayman fell like a cannonball, triggering a wave of shock within everyone's hearts. Within a radius of 10 zhang, those who heard those words fell into an abrupt silence. Even the battle going on in the distance seemed to have grown considerably quieter. Everyone was staring at the kneeling highwayman with dumbfounded gazes. You bastard! What kind of nonsense are you speaking? Shocked and angered by the news, Zhou En glared at the reporting highwayman and kicked him aside. Our chief possesses unparalleled cultivation and is protected by the Iron Cloak technique. How could he possibly die? If you continue uttering nonsense here, don't blame me for turning nasty, Zhou En said as he drew his saber and pressed it against the highwayman's neck. The chief couldn't possibly have died at this moment. He mustn't. Given his superior martial arts and the elites that had followed him there, how could he possibly be unable to defeat that young brat and those pesky soldiers with him? No matter what, Zhou En would never believe such ridiculous rumors. However, the uneasiness he felt was swiftly intensifying. Regardless of the truth, there was one thing he was sure of. Something must have happened on the chief's end. But Zhou couldn't imagine what could have happened within this short period of time. Where are Hu Lang, Chang Dao, and Hui Yuan? Are they all dead? Why aren't they back yet? Zhou, look who it is. Just as Zhou was plagued with doubts, a deafening bellow suddenly sounded out, following which a round and black object was tossed over from the bend at the main road. After tumbling several times in the air, it accurately pierced onto a sharp branch pointed upward. A gale blew past, and the cloth wrapping around it scattered, revealing a gruesome head within. Whoosh! Upon seeing the face on the head, the hundreds of bandits and highwaymen in the area cried out in sheer terror as they backed away. There were even a few who unwittingly tumbled down the slope after losing their balance. Chief! Seeing that head, Zhou's eyes reddened in fury. That head belonged to no other than Ironcloakly. His eyes were still wide open, as if he was unable to believe that he could be killed even at his dying breath. Zhou couldn't understand how Ironcloakly, who possessed the protection of the Iron Cloak technique, allowing him to withstand attacks from even 10 true martial realm experts simultaneously, could actually be killed. In that instant, Zhou felt as if his entire world had collapsed. Everyone, listen. That isn't the chief, but a head they had forged in replica of him. Obey my commands. Devote your strength into attacking those soldiers on the slope and slaughter them clean. I'll personally kill anyone who dares to hold back. Zhou yelled viciously as he pointed at the soldiers on the slope. Zhou, that's not your call to make, a voice sounded. In the next instant, the great Tang cavalryman on the slope abruptly charged out of the endless sea of bandits and highwaymen in an arrow formation. Hong! The crowd immediately descended into chaos. After the elites among the highwaymen and bandits were taken away, none of the bandits and highwaymen remaining in the area had reached true martial realm. After seeing the fearsome might of the great Tang cavalryman's charge from Wang Chong's platoon, who could possibly remain unfazed in their presence, especially since their chief, Ironcloakly, was likely to have been killed already? Get out of the way! Be careful, here they come again. Even the chief has been killed. We should hurry up and flee. Chaos broke out amidst the horde. There were even some who began to run away frantically, scrambling to escape as far from the great Tang cavalry as possible. The entire situation descended into chaos. Atrocious! How dare you all run away now? Stop what you are doing! Zhou bellowed in rage as he whipped out his saber to punish the highwayman. However, before he could even make a move, he suddenly heard an icy-cold voice by his ear. Single character consecutive slash. Slapping the back of his steed, Wang Chong leaped across space and stabbed his sword deep into Zhou's neck. From the very start, he had already known that Zhou was just a pure military strategist who lacked proficiency in martial arts. Zhou barely saw a flash of cold light before he was stabbed by Wang Chong's sword. In his final instant, he saw an incomparably sharp sword with innumerable small sawtooths on its edge, and its surface was covered with elegant flowing marks. A Wuxia steel sword. Unlike Ironcloakly, Zhou knew what a Wuxia steel sword looked like, as well as its background. Many thoughts flashed across his mind as realization struck him. To think that was the final thought that flashed through his mind before everything blanked into an empty void. With Zhou as an example, anyone who dares to resist shall suffer the same fate as him. Wang Chong beheaded Zhou with a clean slash, stepped onto the boulder, and raised the man's head up high. Hong Long. Ironcloakly was dead. Zhou was dead as well. With their two leaders gone, the highwaymen and bandits found themselves losing their fighting will. Thus, they immediately turned around to flee. Brothers, our time for vengeance has come. On the slope, the surviving cavalrymen cheered in delight. As the two forces joined together, they began to pursue to clear away the fleeing highwaymen and bandits. With their forces scattered, the few hundred remaining bandits and highwaymen fell even faster. In just a few short moments, several dozen of them were already lying in a pool of blood. Seeing the swift defeat of the highwaymen and bandits, Wang Chong heaved a long sigh of relief. In truth, had they chosen to put up a resistance, just with their numbers itself, there was no guarantee that the soldiers would be the final victors. After all, most of the cavalrymen were already exhausted at this point. Wang Chong was also taking a risk by charging right in. It was fortunate that perhaps due to Zhou En's great influence on the Iron Cloak highwaymen, beheading him had a powerful dampening effect on their morale. The bandits and highwaymen found themselves losing their will to fight after seeing Zhou En's head in his hand. A strategy assailing hearts is superior to a strategy taking down a fortress. Such is indeed the case. Wang Chong remarked as he watched the bandits and highwaymen flee for their lives. In his previous life, Wang Chong had met with plenty of opponents that were far more formidable than these bandits and highwaymen. But without a doubt, since his reincarnation, he had never been closer to death than this. The bandits and highwaymen might be weak and insignificant individually, but once their numbers added up, they were still a force to reckon with. To Wang Chong, this was indeed an experience he would be unlikely to forget. Da-da-da. While Wang Chong was in the midst of pondering, a flurried clopping of horse hooves sounded, and he lifted his head. A man riding on a steed was rushing toward Wang Chong at an astonishing speed. "Lord, it's great to see you all. We thought that we were going to die there." Lieutenant Zhang Lin leaped off the back of his steed and bowed deeply to Wang Chong. His eyes were overflowing with excitement and delight, but at the center of it all was still respect. Wang Chong had truly saved their lives this time. If it wasn't for him, they might have already caved in long ago. More importantly, from a military man's point of view, Zhang Lin could see an extraordinary aptitude for command within the young man. Even though the young man before him hadn't assumed any official positions yet, Zhang Lin had little doubt that he would eventually rise to a great height and achieve astounding feats. As a military man himself, Zhang Lin had deep respect for those who showed outstanding capability in warfare. "Lieutenant Zhang is being too polite. We are all working together for the royal court, so it's only natural for us to cover for one another. Had we been in your place, I believe that you would have done the same for us as well," Wang Chong replied calmly. Taken aback by Wang Chong's words, Zhang Lin fell silent instead. He shot a sideward glance at Su Gan and Huang Yongtu, who were in the midst of venting their frustrations and anger on the fleeing bandits and highwaymen, and a hint of bitter smile emerged on his lips. If the ones who had been surrounded were this young lord and Bai Siling, he couldn't say for sure whether their platoons would have saved them. Seeing the expression on Zhang Lin's face, Wang Chong could tell what the other party was thinking of, and he simply smiled it off. In truth, he hadn't done this just to save Su Gan and Huang Yongtu, either. After all, there were many others who were trapped on the slope other than the both of them. With several hundred bandits and highwaymen left, if their forces were to be allowed to be reorganized and start a counterattack, Wang Chong's group would suffer greatly. Thus, even after the highwaymen and bandits scattered, the soldiers didn't stop their pursuit. Only after an incense's time later, when the escaping bandits and highwaymen had completely scattered into the depths of the mountain, did the battle come to an end. All of the fortunate Great Tang cavalrymen survivors began to gather around the boulder Wang Chong was standing on. Out of their initial 80 military veterans, only 44 remained after this operation. Out of the 36 casualties, almost half of them were caused by Iron Cloak Li. While they did manage to kill the powerful and influential Iron Cloak Li who had dominated the road between the capital and Longxi, as well as 300 highwaymen and bandits, including 80 true martial realm highwaymen, Wang Chong still couldn't help but feel a stabbing pain in his heart at the loss. Those cavalrymen had devoted their lives to protecting the country. Even if they had to die, it should be on a great battlefield against the armies of a hostile nation, where they could be honored for their sacrifice, and not at the hands of these unknown highwaymen. But some things were simply not meant to be. The sound of galloping horses echoed in the surroundings. Wang Chong fell deep into thought, and eventually the galloping came to a halt. Not only that, there wasn't the slightest sound to be heard, as if the entire world had fallen silent. Astonished, Wang Chong raised his gaze, only to see that the cavalrymen had gathered around him. The ones at the forefront of the group were Su Gan, Huang Yongtu, and Bai Siling, and everyone's eyes were focused on him. The atmosphere was slightly bizarre. "What's wrong?" Wang Chong asked in astonishment. "Who in the world are you?" Su Gan asked with a grave expression, as if he was staring at some kind of unfathomable mystery. The battle has already ended. Do you not intend to tell us who you are? Huang Yongtu asked earnestly from the back of his horse. I have been with you all for the last few days. Don't you know who I am? Wang Chong chuckled. You know that isn't what we meant. Su Gan shook his head, but the determination in his eyes showed that he wasn't willing to let the matter rest until he got to the bottom of it. Xiling, what about you? Are you going to join them as well? Wang Chong glanced at Bai Xiling, who was standing side by side with Su Gan and Huang Yongtu. Do you even need to ask that? Bai Xiling rolled her eyes in annoyance. I am the one who is the most curious of them all right? It's one thing for the both of them to not know. But I have been with you throughout the entire journey, and we have undergone many life and death situations together. Yet you choose to conceal the matter from me as well. If not for my own decorum, I might have lifted you up to smack your bottom already. Bai Xiling grit her teeth in suppressed fury. That bastard seemed to be extremely wary around her. Even when they were clearing dens together, he would only put in the minimum effort required to accomplish the task, seemingly unwilling to reveal any more than that. She was no fool. How could she have not sensed that? If they had not encountered Iron Cloakly, which forced that fellow into action, Bai Xiling would have never known that he had such astounding ability to command within him. The more she thought about it, the more furious she felt. Thus, she decisively chose to side with Su Gan and Huang Yongtu this time. This is a clear betrayal, Wang Chong exclaimed. Tisk! Bai Xiling turned her head to the side heartlessly. If I'm not mistaken, that sword in your hand should be a Wuxia steel sword. Am I right? At this moment, Su Gan shot a glance at the sword in Wang Chong's hands and asked him that question. The price of such a sword has already skyrocketed to around 80,000 gold taels each, and often it will even reach the 100,000 price range. Furthermore, it is a market severely lacking in supply. Surely you won't say that a sword like yours is common. As a scion, Su Gan would be blind if he couldn't even recognize a famous Wuxia steel sword from the capital. At this point, it was clear that Bai Xiling was right. He and Huang Yongtu had indeed gauged Wang Chong wrongly. Even he couldn't afford such an expensive item, needless to say others. But in response to that, Wang Chong simply chuckled silently. Lieutenant Zhang, do you share the same thoughts as them as well? He turned around to ask the silent Zhang Lin standing behind the others. I would be honored to learn of Lord's identity, Zhang Lin said as he bowed deeply in respect. Wang Chong had shown astounding prowess as a commander in this operation. If not for him, their group would have been completely wiped out. As such, Zhang Lin desired to know Wang Chong's true identity deep inside. Sigh, Lieutenant Zhang, you as well. I guess I have no choice then. Wang Chong grabbed his forehead in distress. It was one thing for the others, but to think that even Lieutenant Zhang was joining along. From the looks of it, if he couldn't offer them a proper explanation, they wouldn't give in. And indeed, after all they had been through, it didn't seem right for him to keep his identity from them either. All right, since you desire to know so much, I'll fulfill your wish then. Chuckling, Wang Chong grabbed a golden token from the side of his waist and displayed it to everyone. Hong! Upon seeing the token with the engraving of flames on it, astonishment flashed through everyone's eyes. Burning clouds. This is the token of Wang clan. You are a member of the Wang clan. In that instant, Su Gan, Huang Yongtu, Zhang Lin, and even Bai Xiling froze in shock. All this time, most of them had thought that Wang Chong had come from a humble birth. But it turned out that not only was Wang Chong's birth not humble, it was even more prestigious than any of them here. Even the Su clan or Huang clan couldn't possibly compare with a clan of generals and ministers like the Wang clan. Bai Xiling did have her own guesses regarding Wang Chong's identity, but even so, the truth was far beyond her expectations. The Bai clan could be considered as an extremely influential clan in the capital, ranking above that of the Su clan and Huang clan. But even they paled slightly in face of the Wang clan. What is your relationship with Duke Zhou? Huang Yongtu asked with a grim expression. I am at a loss for words. The Wang clan is founded by Duke Zhou, and I am an offspring of the Wang clan. What do you think my relationship with him is? Wang Chong said as he scratched his head. Realizing the foolishness behind his question, Huang Yongtu descended into awkwardness. Of the Wang clan, only the 3 children of General Wang Zhen are involved in the military. The eldest son Wang Fu is currently serving on the front lines, and the second son Wang Bei shouldn't be as young as you are. So if I'm not mistaken, you must be the third son, Wang Chong, Su Gan suddenly asked. Yes, Wang Chong admitted to it readily. Su Gan seemed to be more intelligent than he had expected, guessing his identity in an instant. Hearing Wang Chong admitting to the matter, Su Gan's gaze suddenly rippled with complex emotions. Within the younger generation in the capital, the one whose reputation was the brightest at the moment was none other than the third son of the Wang clan, Wang Chong. The conflict with the Yao clan, the regional commander's incident, the Gogrian assassins, even the most doted-on consort Taizhen of the sage emperor seemed to have close ties with Wang Chong. Despite his young age, the feats he had accomplished had impressed even someone like Su Gan. After traveling together for so many days, Su Gan truly couldn't have imagined that the young man who he had looked down upon all along would actually be the famous Wang Chong. Had he known, he wouldn't have adopted such an attitude. After all, a person of Wang Chong's standing would be a valuable friend to make. I can't take it any longer. Just as Wang Chong was slightly gleeful over the awe he was getting, a voice suddenly raged from the side. Bai Siling was staring at Wang Chong with a frenzied expression. Brat! How dare you fool me for so long? I'll kill you. Brandishing her sword, Bai Siling leaped from the back of her steed and rushed up to Wang Chong. Putting aside Su Gan and Huang Yongtu, even Wang Chong himself was stunned by this turn of events. Bai Siling, what are you doing? Wang Chong immediately executed his phantom steps and leaped down from the boulder. Hong! Many sparks flew from the boulder as an inch-deep sword mark scarred the spot where Wang Chong was standing just an instant ago. Cold sweat began trickling down Wang Chong's back. That violent lady really didn't hold back at all. Brat, don't you flee. Let me get 3 slashes on you to appease my anger. Like hell I won't flee. The duo began flying across the forest, and the sight left the crowd chuckling lightly. The hilarious scene had lifted the sorrowful atmosphere drifting in the air slightly. Eventually, Bai Siling ran out of strength and gave up. After all, she had suffered 2 heavy blows from Iron Cloakly. If not for her superior cultivation, she might have been shaken to death. I'll get back at you once I recover from my injuries. Sitting down on the boulder, she wagged her finger at Wang Chong while panting heavily. Feel free. Wang Chong chuckled lightly. Even though Bai Siling had chased him around the forest, it did feel like their relationship had grown more intimate after he had revealed his identity. Finally, when everyone had calmed down, Su Gan asked, What do we do now? How should we deal with the corpses of our brothers? Let's bury them together. I wish to give them a proper burial so that they can rest in peace. Bai Siling was the one who suggested this with a sorrowful gaze in her eyes. After all, she had spent many days fighting alongside them as comrades in arms, so she felt awful to see so many of them die so suddenly. There's no need for that. Wang Chong shook his head grimly. Leave them here. We'll inform the Bureau of Military Personnel and have them send men over as soon as possible to deal with them. The families of the fallen soldiers will be compensated, and their children will receive special privileges. Their names will be recorded, and they will be honored like fallen soldiers on the battlefield. That would be the best for them. Zhang Lin glanced at Wang Chong with slight astonishment in his eyes. However, recalling Wang Chong's background, he soon nodded in realization. Wang Gongzi is right. This will be what they would have wanted as well, an honorable death, Zhang Lin said. So that more people could live a peaceful life to a ripe old age, some would have to pick up arms and brave the battlefield to protect them. From the moment they first stepped on the battlefield, they were already prepared for death. But the Bureau of Military Personnel won't agree to it. After all, Su Gan said hesitantly. Even though Su Gan's words had trailed off at this point, everyone understood what he meant. Don't worry, they will. I will make them agree to it, Wang Chong said deeply.